Our next speaker is called Nafez. I'm going to give him a quick introduction. He's the founder and director of Edraak.org, an online education effort of the Queen Rania Foundation, aiming to provide free, high-quality online and blended education to Arabic speakers across the region. Edraak has managed to reach over 400,000 Arabic-speaking learners across the region. Previously, Nafez was a strategy consultant at PwC's education practice. While at Yale, he completed a year-long award-winning thesis on the obstacles towards curriculum reform in the Middle East. He used Jordan and the UAE as case studies, and the Dubai School of Government actually published an executive summary of his work. He recently completed a 6-week fellowship with New America in Washington, D.C., working on the crossroads of Islamic education after the 2011 revolution. It is my pleasure to introduce Nafez, who as soon as he finishes hold that thought, in about 5 seconds it's going to be my pleasure. And still, any more marriage proposals in the meantime? All right, it's now my pleasure to introduce Nafez.
Thank you, Khalid. Another round of applause, please, everybody, for Zina for such a powerful talk and doing all this even while she's sick. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today and giving us the opportunity to share some of our stories with you. With the largest refugee crisis since World War II, terrorism, fundamentalism, sectarianism, and pretty much all the isms that you can fit in one sentence, rampant between Yemen and Libya, I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody here that the optimism, the excitement around the Arab world, around my part of the world, has pretty much all but disappeared at this point. However, as a wise man once said, only in darkness can you see the stars. I'm here with you today to share stories about people building bridges among countries in the Arab world, among different communities in the Arab world, between the Arab world and the diaspora. Stories of building bridges that I hope can show you some of these stars that I'd like to talk about. Abdullah is from Syria. Abdullah is in his early 20s, and when he was in his last year of university, the civil war in Syria broke out. Because of the violence and the displacement, Abdullah was not able to continue his education. However, through his perseverance and the generosity of others and an online connection, Abdullah was able to maintain some lifeline towards his education. One of the latest courses that Abdullah took was a course, ironically, on the reconstruction and development of the Arab world, to which he had this to say: "I had to stop my education after the war. I found in these courses an alternative and a lifeline to my formal education. I signed up for this course because I see a nation being destroyed everywhere I look, and because I believe in the importance of change in the Arab world." Almost 3 times Abdullah's age, Naila from Jordan had 30 years of teaching experience before she finally took an online course on child mental health. The course allowed Naila an opportunity to finally better understand and better serve her learners. What is remarkable about all these courses is that perhaps several of them, and most of them, were not offered by instructors in the Arab world. They were offered by instructors across the world, in the diaspora, sometimes even here in Cambridge, some of which are actually with us here in the room. For example, the course on child mental health was offered by Dr. Hisham Hamouda while he was here in Cambridge with teaching assistants in Kuwait and Dubai, and to learners across the Arab world. And it's not only professors in the diaspora that are giving back, it's also professors in the region. One of these professors, Professor Yusuf Sidani at the American University of Beirut, recently offered a course on success in the workplace. Professor Yusuf remarked to me that with 3,000 people completing his course, he'd actually reached more people than he'd probably reach in the next 30 years of his life. Professor Yusuf teaches around 100 students a year. And it wasn't just the number of students that left an impact on Professor Sidani. It was the type and the different places the students came from, whether they're from Yemen, Libya, and Iraq, and sometimes just down the street in Beirut, that perhaps wouldn't have had the means or the academic ability to actually take a course at AUB. These bridges weren't being built just between students and professors. Some of these bridges were actually being built between students themselves. Earlier this year, one of the course managers on the team came to me and he said, we have to let some of the teaching assistants for our healthcare course go. The teaching assistants weren't doing a bad job, just that one of the 19-year-old students had taken it upon herself to quickly and rapidly answer the questions of all the other learners. She even went a step ahead of all the teaching assistants and was offering a summary of each week's lecture notes to her fellow learners. These are just some of the stories that I'm privileged and fortunate to hear almost every day at Edraak. Edraak is an online learning platform developed by the Queen Rania Foundation using open source code developed down the street here at MIT. Over the past 18 months, Edraak has reached well over 400,000 registered learners that have taken over 28 courses and completed and earned over 25,000 certificates. 2 months ago, we were conducting interviews for job openings at Edraak. One of the candidates that really left a mark on me was Mustafa. Mustafa was not only top of his class. Mustafa had managed to take 20 courses online, on Edraak, on Coursera, and all the other platforms, and had also been able to fulfill a part-time job to support his family. When I asked Mustafa how he found the time to do all of this, he remarked that he simply didn't go to lecture anymore. Mustafa did not go to lecture because the material was easy. In fact, he found it particularly hard. Mustafa did not go to lecture because instructors didn't usually show up. And when they did, unfortunately, they didn't always do a good job. Mustafa's story reminded me that I, and perhaps like many of you here, maybe most of you, I'm one of the lucky ones. I was lucky enough to have a great education. And also showed me that perhaps the problem with education reform, is everybody trying to fix education has an education. Everybody thinking about education reform, the system works for them pretty well. They usually come on top of their class, they go to places like Harvard, and then they try to fix education. All this to say that the potential and power of online education isn't just in informal or non-formal opportunities. It can also have a big impact inside the classroom. Only in darkness can you see the stars. And I hope that I've been able to show you some stars here today. However, I think we all agree that the night is still young in the Arab world, and we have a long way to go. There are no silver bullets to the problems we have in the Middle East. There are certainly no silver bullets to the challenges we face in education. But there are people, many of which are in this room today, that have come together and tried to make the Arab world a better place by taking that first step. And I do hope that whether you decide to come back or give back, that you join us on this journey. As a wise man once said, the only way to predict the future is to create it. Let's create it together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nafez, for that honestly inspirational talk on how we can change things from the ground up, which is through education. So we're going to leave a couple of minutes open in case any of you have questions that you want to ask Nafez. I see one right over there. So please go ahead. We'll get a microphone to you as well from right over there. Oh, we got it. Turn it on.
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, so you mentioned the formal and non-formal education. Well, there's been a lot of initiatives, like you know, obviously, and I'm very proud to be one of the instructors. The problem is that people still need to go to schools and they still need to succeed and do all of like the process that's rather exhausting and really costly. Where do you see like the dynamic going towards like shifting completely? Is it going to shift completely to non-formal, or is the formal going to adopt non-formal tactics?
Sure. I don't think there's sort of a one-size-fits solution to this answer and to education in general, and perhaps that's part of the problem. In the Middle East, unfortunately, demand for higher education has risen over fourfold in the last 40 years. To meet the demand in higher education through brick and mortar solutions, we'd probably need to build around 300 new buildings a year to just accommodate the demand in education. I mean, you have countries like Egypt where there's just no way you are going to be able to meet all this demand through brick and mortar solutions. And again, I'm not saying that sort of face-to-face learning it's great, but the best sort of form of education is probably blended. And if anybody's interested, I mean, there's a long discussion that we can get into sort of what's more effective, what's more scalable. But yeah, I mean, definitely I see sort of both in-person and online education being part of the way forward.
All right, we have time for one more. If we get a microphone right over there.
Hi, I think this all sounds great for self-motivated students that actually see the value of this, but how do you see this as a solution to a problem of like a generation of students that don't know or are not aware of this, or are not internally motivated, and how do you see the role of parents shaping the future?
Sure, so I guess two-part question, two-part answer. So we're actually starting to work in some of the refugee camps, and there where people usually need a lot more psychosocial support, need a lot more guidance, a more blended form of education is definitely necessary, and that's something we've been working on. And the idea is to also create more incentives for people to complete the courses, and we recently just signed our first agreement with the university in Jordan, where if you're enrolled in that university and you take the course online, it'll be completely free. The role of parents is extremely important in education. The number one predictor of how you do on any sort of OECD design exam, whether that's sort of PISA or TIMSS, is the question, like, is your parents' answer to the question, how often do you ask your child, how did you do in school? That's the number one predictor. It trumps everything. So parental involvement is super important. And one thing that we've been able to do with courses like child mental health, and hopefully more courses on parenting, is give parents a better idea of how they can have a more positive impact on enrollment.
All right, thank you very much, Nafez. One more clap.